I was going to start off today's video by making an incel joke, but that would undermine the fact that there is actually an F1 driver that wears an Iron Cross. Hello folks, and welcome to this video. Here I'm going to be discussing Lando Norris, and I'm going to be discussing an interview with him published on motorsport.com with Luke Smith, the author, you can find in the description below, where he talks about his attitudes towards himself and how he presents. And before I get into the content itself, if you do enjoy it, make sure to stick around. I do general motorsportsy content as well as a bit of sim racing stuff. But you can also use the comment section down below as a bit of a forum. But remember, keep it respectful, and yeah, that's pretty much that. Let's get into talking about the topic. So in this interview, it's sort of written in light of comments made by Lando at the Portuguese Grand Prix last year. After Lewis Hamilton's record-breaking 90-second win at Portimao, Lando made comments, well, to the nature of Lewis being in the Mercedes shows that there's not so much of a challenge to him breaking these records, because typically he's only really got Bottas to beat unless Red Bull are having a good day with the car. He then later apologised for these, but in the comments that are in this article, he's saying, well, I don't think I should be criticised for it when you see Kimi not getting criticised for it. And he's sort of done with being considered F1's nice guy, and he wants to be recognised for who he is and being a bit more ruthless on track. This is part of a changing attitude as well. Like, he stopped kind of memeing himself so much in the 2020 season and making jokes and making light of things because he felt like that was something wrong for him to do. Now, what I really want to talk about is this whole kind of strain and chain, because it is quite troubling. What we're hearing is one of the young up-and-coming F1 drivers saying that he's essentially scared to be himself. He's not explicitly saying it, but if you read between the lines, he's saying he's having to mask who he is because he's afraid he's going to be criticised for it, or be attached to comments like him being nice, which for some reason he sees as a bad thing. And I'm not going to say that it's silly necessarily that he sees it as a bad thing, but the fact that he has to think about being the nice guy in F1 as the bad thing says something about the state F1's in. Now, probably a lot of the less progressive F1 fans won't like the idea of me talking about toxic masculinity in F1, but there is a large element of it. If you've got an F1 driver saying, I don't want to be considered the nice guy, that's a bit toxic. And especially for me, where I consider the next driver in the line the F1 greats going, it's worrying. So for me, when I talk about the greats of F1, it's somebody who's brought something in that's kind of pioneered or revolutionised the sport, or done something that's been important to how the sport is now. So the last two drivers I think of as greats of F1 are Lewis Hamilton and Michael Schumacher. For Schumi, it's because he brought the gym to the track and had such an intense kind of fitness and workout regime that is now a standard in F1. In addition to that, there are all kinds of other bits and pieces he has, such as his attachment in terms of personally to the team. Like, you can hear of stories of when he was at Ferrari, he knew all the names of the people he was working with, and he remembered their birthdays and their families' birthdays. And then you think about the likes of Lewis Hamilton, who have started to hone more in and finesse the skills that Schumi brought to the table. And then in addition to that is something else. Lewis is probably F1's first massive celebrity. I mean, you could also argue the likes of Senna, James Hunt had a massive cult of celebrity around them, but not in the way that Lewis did, because Lewis is F1's first big social media star. He's the one with the international following, and he's the one with that massive international platform. Not, like, largely it is the English-speaking world, but you have got the UK and the US in there, and there are also other countries around the world, especially for people who are people that speak the language of English, that recognise Lewis Hamilton and have a massive following for what he's saying and doing in the world of F1. It's not even a kind of politics of the sport thing, because we've seen that before. We've seen that with the likes of Jackie Stewart. But there's a different kind of politics that Lewis Hamilton brings to the table. And that's another thing that makes him a great. Like, whether or not it was something that I agree with, it just happens it is politics that I, by and large, agree with Lewis. It's the fact that he brings that to the table that makes him, in my view, objectively a great. The next F1 great for me is the one who will sort of refine the attitude to social media. It will be the engagement with the fans. And it'll be not only the engagement with the fans, but the ability to be themselves. And I honestly looked a lot to Lando to be that guy. And one of the things you might recognise is a lot of the metrics that I use don't necessarily concern wins, championships, podiums. I mean, I say that, and then I've got the two most winningest drivers in F1 as the last two big greats. But for me, I believe that it's going to be the likes of Lando or George Russell, who are going to be the next F1 greats. And it doesn't mean that they're going to have to be multiple-time world champions. Heck, they're both almost certainly going to be race winners, but they don't necessarily even have to be race winners for it to happen. But if they are able to be unashamedly themselves and have the kind of power in them to speak from the heart, that's a great thing. And we shouldn't be discouraging drivers from doing that, even if that's them being portrayed as the nice guy. Which is why I find Lando comparing himself to Kimi all the more troubling. Because Kimi is seen as F1's elder statesman, and this sort of less progressive audience like him for it. Even if it means that they like what I consider the negative sides that come with having Kimi around. But they're never going to have the time for Lando, and he shouldn't be trying to pursue them. He should be trying to pursue having these people be his fans. This comes with a great dilemma, and I think Lando will be able to solve it. I think when he does, he'll be able to be the nice guy he wants to be, and the guy who he is on social media and as a more personable person, but also able to show his ruthlessness on track. And I think he'll be able to do that this season. And do you know why? Because his teammate is Daniel Ricciardo, a guy who is already able to do that. Daniel Ricciardo is one of the nicest guys in F1, and he's always had the openness to talk about issues that he thinks are important. But at the same time, he's also been able to be ruthless on track. Now, I wouldn't necessarily put Ricciardo as the next F1 great, because for me, he doesn't bring that extra bit to the table. If he does, then I would consider him it. He's one of my favourite drivers for sure, but whether or not he's a great is another question. But I do think Lando has that potential. I think it's Lando, and I think failing that, it's probably George Russell. But then those are my thoughts, and honestly, thank you so much for sitting down and listening to me on this. It means a lot. So thank you for watching, and I hope to see you again soon. Bye for now.